This video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a relative compression test. This is a simple compression test that you can do with an oscilloscope. You don't need to take any spark plugs out. You don't need to do anything. And it's a good way to tell whether or not compression is the issue for your misfire. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, I'm going to hook up the picoscope. So the hardware, and so this is the picoscope here, and I've got the blue cable attached to channel number 1. I've got the the USB cable plugged into the computer back there. And then the only tool we're going to need on this particular job is an amp clamp. And the way the amp clamp fits on is the end of the leads on the Pico. So the end of the channel leads, you just plug the amp clamp into the bottom of those leads. And then turn the amp clamp on. So we're going to click it on. So now we've got the little green light there. And all we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're going to clamp it onto the battery wire. So the wire that goes back to the battery. And that's it. So that's all we have to do to hook up the Pico. Hopefully you'll be able to see this screen a little bit better than the last video I made with the picoscope. So I've been playing around with the camera angles a little bit. So anyway, just to remind you, we're going to start off by opening up the Pico software, and it's the one that does not say beta. So Pico 6 Automotive is what the actual shortcut says on the desktop. And it does take a minute for it to boot up, but once it boots up, it'll give us the main screen for the Pico, and then it'll probably pop up with I call it the commercial screen, you call it propaganda screen, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, it's all of the, I say that sarcastically, but it's all of the really good information that Pico gives you. So it looks like we're just going to get this screen here. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it what we want to look at. So we're going to come up here to the soft button, which is automotive. It's this one right up here. And click the down button and charging and starting, and it'll bring over another drop down menu, and it says charging circuits, relative compression, and starting circuits. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the relative compression, and then it's going to ask you, is it petrol or is it diesel? And because this is a British made tool, they call gasoline petrol. So it's a petrol vehicle application, so there it loads up. Now it should give us an example waveform. There it is. So this example waveform, there's all the information. I knew that screen would pop up eventually. But basically this is just telling you about all of the different information you would need on a relative compression test. So if you want more information on this, don't skip this page. Go ahead and read it. But there's a lot of really, really good information there. As far as looking at the trace, what we're going to do is each one of these humps is the compression, the resistance that the starter motor feels when it cranks over the engine. So if you've ever cranked an engine over by hand, you know that every time you turn the engine, when you come up on compression stroke on any of the cylinders, you're going to meet a little bit of resistance as it comes up, as it's compressing that air inside the engine. And the starter motor is no different. And so every time the starter motor feels that resistance, the amperage goes up. And so each one of these little humps is an amperage hump on the starter motor. So you can count them. You know, these are each one of the cylinders. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it starts over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now on this particular test, there's not really a good way to tell which cylinder is what. So I don't know whether this hump right here is cylinder number 1 or cylinder number 5. I have no idea. So there's other ways that you can determine which number the cylinder is that's malfunctioning. This also will not pick up an electrical issue. So if you have a bad spark plug wire, or coil, this test will still say you've got good compression. All this is eliminating the mechanical on the compression test. So the compression test, you do the compression test in order to determine whether or not you've got ring problems, valve problems, piston problems, things like that. And so that's why you would do this test. So now I'm going to go ahead and start the trace, and I have already disabled spark and fuel. So you want to disable both the spark and the fuel in order to do this test, so you don't throw a whole bunch of gasoline down the thing and cause a big kaboom and blow the muffler off. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom left-hand corner. There's a little green arrow and a little red stop sign, or red square. The green arrow starts your trace and the red one stops it. So we're going to go ahead and hit the green arrow, and that should give us a trace going all the way across. Now, for some reason I've got my trace stopped right there, so I'm going to move this little button all the way over so we can see it all the way across. So now I'm going to crank the engine. And I paused it. So we do have a little gobbledygook or a little bit of noise on there. That doesn't really matter right now. What we're looking for is we're looking for nice even humps going across here. And it looks like I've got some really good even humps going across. So right now this engine's showing like it's got good compression. And like I say, all I had to do is hook up an amp clamp to it. So let's see what it looks like if I have no compression on a cylinder. Okay, we're going to start the trace again, and what I've done is I've removed one of the spark plugs and I've grounded out the spark plug wire so that I don't have all that coil energy building up and burning up my coil. So I've grounded out the spark plug wire. I've removed one of the spark plugs, so we have a dead cylinder. Let's see what it looks like with a relative compression test. Now first off, what I want you to pay attention to is I want you to pay attention to the sound of the engine. You might have heard that kind of a da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, and it was kind of had that rhythmic thing. That right there, if you get used to that sound, here I'll do the sound again so you can hear it. You get familiar with that sound, you don't have to do a test. You crank the engine over, you know you have a dead cylinder right there. And so, you know, get used to that. But here's what we're looking at here. So we've got even humps there, 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 there. We're missing one. And then it starts over again. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the sixth one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, missing one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, missing one. So we've got one dead cylinder. So now it's just a matter of figuring out what cylinder is dead. You can do that by a whole bunch of different ways. If you have the adapter for the scope, you can hook it up and you can look at the secondary ignition and you can synchronize it with here. So you can plug the secondary ignition onto cylinder number 1, and that way you'll get a spark line on every time cylinder number 1 fires. So say for instance, if this is cylinder number 1 and it fires here, then all you'd have to do is count the firing order. And on this engine here, I believe it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if this is cylinder number 1, that would be cylinder number 2, 3, 4, and it'd be cylinder number 5 that would be missing, 6, and so forth. Another way that you can find this cylinder that's missing is by doing a cylinder balance test. And I've got another video out on cylinder balance testing that you can look at. I'll make sure it's in the canvas so you can refer to it if you need to. But you can ground out each cylinder one at a time and determine which cylinder is not contributing. And so that's another way that you can find it. So, but anyway, that's a relative compression test. One of the more easy tests that you'll do with a picoscope.